Welcome to the New Thinking for a New World podcast, where we explore the most pressing issues that are challenging and changing our societies. We are looking for new thinking and new solutions wherever we can find them. Listen as host Alan Stoga, the Talberg Foundation's chairman, challenges his guests for analysis, ideas and actions. Together, we can help make our world at least a bit better.
While much of the world's attention has been focused on the grinding Russian war in Ukraine, over the last months, there have been a series of extraordinary developments in the Middle East that could have almost as big an impact on the shape of the emerging global order. A partial list. China's engineering a rapprochement between supposedly implacable enemies, Iran and Saudi Arabia. The Arab League celebrating the return of Syria's President Assad. Saudi Arabia's application to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization while also moving towards membership in the BRICS. A growing web of diplomatic, economic, and financial ties among China, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab countries, Iran, and even Russia that have intensified as the West tries to enforce draconian sanctions against several of those countries. My guest today can help us make sense of all this. Gilles Kepel is one of France's leading experts on the Middle East. He writes a regular column for Al Monitor, which is a must-read if you care about what's happening in the region. Welcome, Gilles.
Many thanks.
Henry Kissinger once described his most important diplomatic achievement in the Middle East as establishing that the road to peace ran through Washington, not Moscow. Fast forward to 2023. Does the new road to peace and prosperity, perhaps, now run through Beijing?
Well, it does to an extent, because as you mentioned, Beijing brokered the deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran because Beijing could deliver Tehran. Tehran needs Beijing in order to survive economically. Tehran is part and parcel of the Road and Belt Initiative. And without, Chinese help, Iranian economy would be in shambles. And hence, if China does not want Iran to tell the Yemeni Houthis to send drones on Saudi Arabia, Iran won't give the instruction to his allies. This is something that clearly America couldn't do. And, the test was in the just last year and the year before, when there were attacks on Saudi territory, either from Yemeni Houthis, Iran's proxies, or coming from southern Iraq, where they were launched by another Iranian proxy, the so-called Iraqi Hezbollah, and America couldn't do anything. They couldn't deter it. Hence, for Saudi Arabia, making a deal with Beijing is far better. All the more so as Saudi Arabia and Beijing are in business. Saudi Arabia exports a lot of oil to Beijing, which is its first clients. Hence, the Chinese are not interested in having the Saudi oil tankers traffic interrupted, and therefore there are a deal, the different components of which are perfectly functional, whereas America cannot deliver. To start with, America and Saudi Arabia are not really in business anymore over oil. America has regained oil independence that it had in the good old days, thanks to shale oil, conditional to the fact that oil prices are sufficiently high, and to that extent, sanctions against Russia are a good thing because the prices are high, and also America does not import much Saudi oil at all. So the sort of a business relation between the two countries on this issue is not important. Add to that Russia now is a member of OPEC Plus, and Saudi Arabia has shown more solidarity with his OPEC Plus partner than it has shown with America. The core issue, even before Kissinger's day, was the so-called Quincy St. Valentine or Valentine's Day agreement on the 14th of February 1945 between FDR and King Abdelaziz. My oil for your protection, my protection for your oil. This is now obsolete because the Saudis can export their oil to whoever they want in Asia, and they don't need any US blessing for that. And B, Chinese mediation proved more satisfactory from a protection point of view than America's protection.
So far, as you've just described, China's role has been mostly about economics and now about diplomacy, but not yet really about security and defense, except in this indirect way with the Iranians. Do you think in the world as it's unfolding that the Chinese will play the kind of role that the Americans have played for the last decades in the security space?
Well, when I grew up as a French kid many years ago in the previous century, we used to say that the most important state in the Mediterranean was the American Sixth Fleet, which is not really the case anymore because the Mediterranean is no more a central point of U.S. security. And what made the news in the China Seas last week was that a Chinese aircraft carrier had crossed the thin line between Taiwan waters and China's water in the Straits of Taiwan. So China is now clearly maybe only gesturing, but is positioning itself in the realm of politics and, if necessary, of warfare. They've had a tremendous increase in their military spending in the Chinese budget, and this is definitely something that is changing the face of the world defense.
Let's talk a bit about the Saudi and Iranian rapprochement beyond the China aspect. For the last several decades, one of the governing ideas in the region had been the famous Shia crescent, the confrontation between Shia on the one hand, Sunni on the other hand, Iran and Saudi. Do you think that is over?
I wouldn't say so, no. It's only being put down for the time being because the Iranian interests and the Arab or the Arabian Peninsula state GCC interests are definitely not exactly the same. Iran has always been willing to reach out to the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, something that traces back to Cyrus the Great, and which led to the counteroffensive by Alexander the Great in the good old days. And what the Islamic Republic had managed to do was to reach out to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon on the basis of a common Shia identity through Syria, which is not Shia, Shia majority country, but an Alawi-controlled country. The Alawis, a sect to which President Bashar al-Assad belongs, is not really Shia, but it's not Sunni. It's not part of the majority Muslim sect. Iraq is majority Shia, and thanks to American neocons, has passed under Iranian tutelage to a large extent after the failure of the U.S. invasion and occupation. And Iran has managed, to build this. It's been called Shiite crescent by King Abdullah of Jordan, but has managed to create an access to the Mediterranean, which is extremely important for its security, because out of southern Lebanon, and even more so with drones and everything that we see now, Shia has the capacity to strike Israel very easily. So in case there is any kind of attack on Iran, it is immediately answered by an attack by Hezbollah and Hamas to some extent, but mostly Hezbollah on the Jewish state. And this is the Iranian form of deterrence, if you wish. Now, Iran has also used that against Saudi Arabia. It has used its proxies in Yemen against Saudi Arabia, as it used its proxies in Lebanon against Israel. And this is unbearable for Saudi Arabia. And so I believe that since Mohammed bin Salman took power, he was keen sort of to put down the Iranian issue in order to build his own expansion into the Arab world. And the Jeddah summit in Saudi Arabia a few days ago demonstrated that Mohammed bin Salman has a completely new agenda. That is to say, he has done with the extreme Wahhabi puritanical Islam. You can now wear shorts in Saudi Arabia. You go to a restaurant where a female Saudi chef without a veil treats you with cuisine and what have you, and Saudi women go to the beach and so on and so forth. So it's a sea change within the Saudi fabric. He's not interested in playing the radical or the extremely conservative Islamic fiddle, if I may say so, anymore. And he's refocusing on influence over the whole Arab world. And in doing so, he doesn't want to underline the antagonism with Iran. It's more a sort of armed peace or armed truce, if I may say so, than real peace, because as long as Iran needs this hostility to survive, they will do it. But if the Iranians believe that Chinese tutelage, or are coerced to believe that Chinese tutelage is good for them, then the antagonism between the two countries decreases. And this is what the Saudis are thinking about.
The logical next question you've already hinted at, which is Israel, and Israel combined with Iranian nuclear file. What could clearly upset that very tenuous balance you just described is further development of Iranian breakout capability and or Israeli effort to stop it.
Well, one thing might be that, China is not interested in having Iran attacking Israel. And if we follow the same line of reasoning as we started before. And also, I guess that, the Saudis watch very closely the capacity of Israel to strike at Iran. I mean, and the Israelis have managed to kill a number of Iranian nuclear scientists, of sending a virus into Iranian nuclear computers, checking their system, and so on and so forth. But this was rebuilt, and it was to no avail, really. So the Saudis, therefore, are dubious about the West's capacity in general, America, but also Israel as part of the West, to check the Iranian threats, and they turn to China because they think that on the short term, at least, it is performing better. As of Israel, also, there's another issue here, that is the Abraham Accords or agreements, that were signed by the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, but Bahrain is is to a large extent a vassal state of Saudi Arabia. So it is not of the same importance as Saudi Arabia or the Emirates. It is not oil rich anymore. And the fact that they signed meant that Saudi Arabia did not object to the agreements, but was not part of it. Then you had the Sudan, which is now out because of its civil war, and the Kingdom of Morocco, which signed the agreements because they had on their own agenda the fact that America would recognize Moroccan sovereignty on Western Sahara, something on which the European Union has been much more cautious, and which allowed Morocco now to try to strong-arm European states so that they align on the American position. But this, looked like it was better than the neocon pipe dream, if I may say so, of having Iraq become an American-style democracy with Democrats and Republicans, and when they thought that Warsaw and Baghdad were more or less the same. Because what worked or seemed to work in the Abraham agreements was the sort of JV thing, Israeli startup nation tech and with Emirati petrodollar cash and the like. But this meant that, the hatchet was buried with the Palestinians. No one cared. The Palestinians were so divided between Hamas, the PA, Islamic Jihad, and the like that the Arabs, were sick and tired of that. Now, many things change, particularly with Bibi Netanyahu's new government. Bibi being hostage to its settlers and to Itamar Ben-Gvir and the like, has raised to the level of outrage, if I may say so, Arab antagonism against Israel. And it is extremely difficult now for Arab states, in order to, if they want to have a sort of wide array Arab backing, to deal with the Abraham agreements. If you look at the Jeddah summit, the Moroccans made a declaration insisting on the fact that the King of Morocco was the chairman of the El Quds committee that helped the Palestinians. It totally toned down the reality of Israeli Moroccan cooperation, which is extremely important on military affairs in particular, and that raises fears in Algeria. And likewise, the UAE were the first to give red carpet treatment to Bashar al-Assad. Assad was received, with a state visit by Mohammed bin Zayed in Abu Dhabi, in order for the Arabs to focus on Abu Dhabi as, championing the former champion of Arabism that was Syria, and not focus too much on the UAE relation with Israel.
I'm glad you mentioned Bashir al-Assad. Last I checked, the West pretty much agrees that he's a war criminal. Yet at the same time, he's welcomed back into, as you just said, Abu Dhabi on 2 state visits, and more recently embraced by the Arab League. Again, it seems an indicator of the dramatic transformation that's going on in the region as they take back their own destiny. The question is this. We've lived through a period where long ago it was the Brits, then the Americans from 1945 on, the Russians for a while, the Americans again from the 70s on, drove geopolitics in the region. Arguably what's happened is that it is now the Arabs and perhaps the Iranians themselves driving the shape of their region. Do you think that's sustainable?
To an extent, definitely. This is the will of Mohammed bin Salman. He doesn't consider that he's the gas station to the West, as was the case in the past. Yeah, like the Saudi kingdom used, its tyrannical way of Islam, dealt with his population the way it wished. But what was at the end of the day, what was important was whether it was good for American oilmen to a large extent, and the Republican Party. This is not the case anymore. I mean, Mohammed bin Salman snubbed Biden when he asked him to increase the oil production in order to inflict punishment on Russia, and so that the price of oil would go down. And he also was extremely resentful against the Biden administration because President Biden had called him a pariah, said he would not shake his hand because of Jamal Khashoggi's murder. And then, to some extent, Biden had to go to Canossa, went to Saudi Arabia last year, asked for the oil production increase, and was turned down. And this was clearly a slap. And then if you look at the Jeddah summit, everybody thought that Bashar al-Assad would be the star. But the limelight was stolen by someone else, Zelensky. Why would Mohammed bin Salman invite Zelensky, who came on a French presidential plane, courtesy of Emmanuel Macron, so that the Russians would not destroy it, or anyone else? Because he wanted to show also to Vladimir Putin that he, Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia, was calling the shots, not Russia. Russia is now in a difficult position in the Ukraine war. It is not at all sure that Russia will win. It is facing enormous pressure. The country is increasingly impoverished. Much of its elites are running away. And therefore, Saudi Arabia is not dependent on Russia. Now, it can use Russia to balance the US or Europe, but he is the one who's gonna have a say, not Vladimir Putin. And this was something that was a means to assert Saudi sort of position, and also a way to some extent to reassure the West that even though he had received a super bad guy, war criminal Bashar al-Assad, nevertheless he listened to Zelensky, who himself is the victim of war crimes by Vladimir Putin. So this is a sort of super transactional relationship with a new emerging power, and there are others in the region, which do not abide by the old post-WW2 world order, and even more so, do not abide by what was called American hyperpower after the demise of the Soviet Union. We are now into a much more multipolar system with the rise of China, the rise of the BRICS, or whatever you call them, and or the Shanghai organization that you mentioned earlier, the attempt of the European Union to stick together militarily, which is not easy. And so this is a totally new world system that, the era of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger is alive and kicking. He's celebrating his 100th anniversary, and he's definitely been one of the critical thinkers of the 20th and early 21st century. But I think we are now getting, if I may say so, into a post-Kissingerian era.
If you feel that the world lacks global leaders, please help support the Thalberg Foundation programs. Individual donations are being accepted at thalbergfoundation.org/donate. That's TALLBERG foundation.org/donate.
We're making a souffle here, and I want to add yet one more ingredient, which is President Erdogan and Turkey. Recently reelected, his AKP party with a absolute majority in the parliament. Does he look east or does he look west? Is he a player in this new Middle East that you've been describing to me?
Well, there is this famous saying that we have in French. I know what you have it in English about the bat. The bat says, "I'm a bird, see my wings, but I'm an animal, see my flesh." And to some extent, President Erdogan, just like the other leaders I mentioned, is playing both ways. He is a NATO member, but he buys S-400s from Russia. He looks east. One of his ministers said, if the opposition wins at the last polls, they will drink champagne. If we win, people will pray towards Mecca in, thanking Allah for our victory. He won. He won irrespective of what many pundits and polls predicted, because they thought that the economy of Turkey is in a catastrophic state. The Turkish lira had plummeted. The earthquakes in February caused more than 50,000 dead, to a large extent because local authorities were bribed by developers in order to build below the threshold of anti-seismic laws. But nevertheless, the core of the Anatolian Sunni Turkish population voted in Erdogan because they would not trust an opposition headed by someone who made no secret that he was an Alevi, i.e., it's part of a nuance among the different Shias, someone also with partly Kurdish origins. This it's something that shows that Turkey is heavily divided, because he did not win by a landslide. He won by a little more than 50%, 52 against 48. So that shows you that you have two Turkeys in a way. And if you look at the map, Istanbul, Ankara, the western Aegean coast, and the southern Mediterranean coast down to Hatay or Antakya, with a border with Syria, voted in majority for the opposition, whereas the core Anatolian heartland voted for this sort of synthesis between nationalism, hyper-Turkish nationalism, anti-Kurdish, and very strongly Muslim identity-based nationalism. So Erdogan has played both, and he will, I believe, use this in order to maximize his power. For instance, as a NATO member, he reiterated that he was using his veto rights not to have Sweden into Turkey, because there are Kurds in Sweden and that he wants extradited to Turkey, accuses of being war criminals and whatever. And this is a strange thing. A NATO member that buys S-400s from Russia on the one hand and vetoes Sweden's entry into NATO on the other hand. So this epitomizes, if you wish, the kind of game that Erdogan is playing. I think it is deeply rooted in a vision or a reading of Ottoman history. It's not so much that it would be a bridge between East and West, but it would maximize its position of being in between.
But it also shows the weakness of Washington and perhaps Paris and Berlin as well, that the dynamism in this story is all outside that core members who used to define Western security. We are takers, not givers of that driving power. How does this play out in the next period, do you think?
Well, it's a little different for Europe and America because Europe now is under the threat, whether it is real or it is politically believed, which is part of a parcel of reality, of illegal immigration from across the Mediterranean, southern, and eastern. And Erdogan is a master player in that. He got a lot of money from the European Union, several billions of euros, in order to keep immigrants into Turkey, which became a problem for him because the opposition just said, we want all those Syrians and Afghans out. But this did not resound that much because, Syrians and Afghans do jobs that now Turks, who have to some extent become affluent, don't want to. Who takes the trash in Istanbul? Afghan refugees. Who drives the trucks? Syrians. And so on and so forth. So and by the same token, they are ready to open the borders whenever there is an issue of tension with Bulgaria, Greece, on Thracia, and on the Aegean Sea, with also this problem in Europe that Germany, the German models needs workforce. Germany and Italy, for instance, have a very big demographic problem. They don't have kids. They'd rather enjoy the good life. So there are no more workers. And the problem with Europe is that you have to let immigrants in. And the same is true and is even worse with southern immigration, because at least with Eastern immigration, you have a spoiler. I mean, Erdogan is an interlocutor. I mean, he's strong-arming the EU, but he's an interlocutor. On the southern side, you have no interlocutor. You have migrants going through Morocco or Algeria to Spain, through Tunisia or Libya to Italy, and then from Italy into France, into trying to reach out to Britain and the like. And this, in turn, has led to the rise of right-wing and extreme right parties all over Europe. So this is changing the whole face of the Mediterranean. And for the difference is that in Europe, immigration is predominantly Muslim, coming from Africa, North Africa, or Asia. And jihadism is also something that had to do with not all Muslims, of course, but a number of militants. So within the mindset of the German population, this is confused. Whereas in America, the things are separated. The mass of illegal immigration comes from Latin America, is not Muslim. The mass of the population which is jailed is Black American. It's not, and Muslims are immigrants, mostly in sort of middle class jobs. People from the Middle East are more middle class than working class in the States. And terrorists, if you wish, have no link with the Muslim population of America, nor with the immigrant population at large. In Europe, it is being perceived confusedly by the electorate, hence the strong tensions that we perceive.
So last question, which is almost impossible to answer. What you've described is a region where the Americans are both leaving and being pushed out. You've described a region that becomes, for all of the migration story purposes, ever more important to Europe, but Europe lacks much agency to shape it. If we fast forward a few years, what is the consequence for the Middle East and for Europe?
Well, as far as America and to a lesser extent Europe is concerned, China has become the big issue. Like, for instance, when after Columbus discovered America, Venice was ruined because Venice was the center of trade between medieval Latin Europe or early Renaissance Latin Europe and the East and the Levant and silks and whatever that came from spices that came from Egypt, that came from Syria and the like. Nowadays, as Hegel would have mentioned earlier on, the spirit of the world is moving to the west, but this west is the western side of America, which was our east, i.e., China, and and then China and America has, if I may say so, a looking west policy, i.e., not the west of Europe, which is America, but the west of America, which is China, which is the Pacific. Hence the sort of look east policy of America, i.e., dealing with the Atlantic, dealing with NATO, and with peace and security in the Eurasian continent, if I may say so, is not the priority for the United States nowadays. I mean, the center of the United States is moving from politically, I mean, from New York to California, or from DC to California, just like in Saudi Arabia, the center of power is moving from Riyadh, which was based on the oil issues in the Arabian or Persian Gulf, to Jeddah and the and the Red Sea, and the west coast of Saudi Arabia, which is looking at the Chinese containers that, as a matter of one every 5 minutes, goes into the Suez Canal to the Mediterranean and Europe. And so this is, I believe, one of the big economic shifts that we witness now, which which was in the making in the Kissinger era, but then this translates into different types of challenges. And for the EU, the main issue is, EU is an economic giant, but it's military and security dwarf, due, among other things, to different visions of Europe among its leaders. So, there are only two countries with a relatively fair military capacity in Europe, which are Britain, which is not part of the EU anymore, and France. Then the others, Germany has had no military budget at all. Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Scholz finally decided that they would revamp the Bundeswehr, but because they thought that Russia was not a threat anymore, they just dismantled it, and the once mighty Bundeswehr of Germany of the last century until the Third Reich was just a shadow of itself. So this is what is at stake now in Europe, and as you mentioned, I think very shrewdly, we are takers more than givers, and this needs an important revolution, because that allowed for Europe to live relatively well, to have a social model that is providing a number of hours of days of holidays, and with very significant social expenses, much more than in America. And to what extent can we go on with that, with war at our borders on the one hand, and illegal migration on the other borders on the other hand? So this is the big question that is ahead of us for the years and decades to come. I'm not sure that either of us will be alive when it's solved, but this is another prediction which I dare not confirm.
I don't know if I would characterize all that as an unstable disequilibrium or maybe an enormous storm about to hit us. In any event, I'd like to thank you, Gilles Kepel, for this conversation, for spending time with us today and for your thinking about the new world that is emerging in the Middle East.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Please rate our show on Apple Podcast and subscribe. Meanwhile, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or you can subscribe to our newsletter at tallbergfoundation.org to learn more about our work. That's TALLBERG foundation.org. Thank you, and we'll be back again next week for another episode of Tallberg's New Thinking for a New World. This podcast was brought to you through the generous support of SNF, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation.